because there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of functionality in the cab app, and I know we have folks on the phone who are either using Drive, going to be using it for the first time here this spring. We also have folks who maybe have used it for multiple years. So I'm going to try and cover almost everything here. We'll start with setting up equipment and move on through some of the very newest features of the system that weren't even in there last year. So there should be a little bit of something for everyone, and just have patience if you're a veteran user and I'm covering some of the basics that you already know. That said, let me go ahead and just jump in, and I'm actually going to spend almost the entire time in the iPad, in the cab app today, just showing you how things work and pushing buttons. So if you have your iPad there with you, please do grab it and follow along, and you can even get some of your pre-planting setup steps done here today. So let me see if I can get my iPad to show on the screen. There we go. If I hit one more button here, I think you guys will be able to see my iPad. There we go. I think right now you guys all should be able to see my iPad. And so I am going to go ahead and get started here. So what we're looking for is we're going to use the cab app today. The cab app is the thing that you will have running in your iPad when you are in the field anytime you're trying to collect data. And the icon for it is in the lower left-hand corner of my iPad screen there. It's a white background, a gray F, and the word cab on it. If you have not installed the cab app on your iPad yet, just go to the App Store and search for Climate FieldView. There's going to be two apps that come up. One will be the cab app, and one will be what we call our black app. Go ahead and install both of them. You're going to use them for different purposes, but the cab app is the one that you use to collect data in the field. And that's the one that you need to have on the iPad if you are using Drive, plugging that little Drive device in and using that in the field. So I'm going to go ahead and launch my cab app, and as you will see, it's a pretty simple user interface here where there's just 6 buttons on the screen. And I'm going to end up showing you today what it looks like when you are collecting data in the field, but before I do that, I'm just going to go through each of these 6 buttons, show you what's behind the button, and also make sure that you know all the features and functionality associated with each button that are important to be aware of as we get set up for the 2019 planting season. So let's go ahead and I'm going to start with the equipment button there in the middle of the screen. And if you have your iPad, certainly feel free to follow along with me. When I click on the equipment button, this is a list of all the different pieces of equipment that I have set up on my farm. So it's going to contain the information about all my tractors, my planters, my sprayers, my anhydrous bars, my tillage bars, my combines, my silage choppers, my cotton pickers, whatever it is that I drive across the field at any point in the season, you can probably set it up in here so that it is ready for you to select when you go into the field and collect data from that piece of equipment. Now, setting up equipment is pretty easy. There's a lot of things, obviously, you can set up here, but let's just go through a couple so you get the understanding of how this works. And if you've never set up a piece of equipment before, feel free to follow along and build one of your pieces of equipment here with me. But I'm going to click the Add New Equipment button at the bottom of the page. And next it asks me what equipment type it is that I'm trying to set up, whether it's a tractor, planter, air seeder, pull-type sprayer, self-propelled sprayer, combine, cotton harvester, self-propelled spreader. The spreader support is new this year, so even if you've been using the system for a while, the support for spreaders is now available. Silage harvesters are new, anhydrous applicators, tillage implement, lots of different pieces of equipment that we can build in the system. But to start with, I'm going to do a tractor because almost everyone has a tractor. So we're going to go ahead and select tractor as our piece of equipment we're setting up. I click next here. It asks me what my tractor make is. And we have a lot of different supported makes here as well as custom. I'm going to say that I've got let's say I've got a New Holland tractor. I hit next. It asks me what model number it is. I can pick a model number. And then it asks whether it's articulated, front, or track steer. I'm going to say this is a front steer tractor. I actually don't know if that matches up with the model I chose, but I'll say it for the sake of picking something. And then I go ahead and I give this tractor a name that I'll recognize it by when I'm in the field. I'll say, oh yeah, I know which one that is, but I'm going to call it my New Holland tractor. I hit next, and then it's just going to ask me a couple last things about get some measurements off of this tractor telling us where the GPS globe is located on the tractor, so that as we're driving through the field, pulling a planter or pulling a sprayer or pulling a tillage bar, whatever it is that we're pulling, we will know how far offset some of those things are happening from the tractor as we drive through the field, and we can put the data in the right place. So almost all of the pieces of equipment that are in our system, we know the default measurements or approximate default measurements as these pieces of equipment come out of the factory. So I can usually leave this alone, but it's probably not a bad idea to take your tape measure with you, go out to your machine shed, and measure some of these distances. What is the distance from the hitch to the rear axle? What is the distance from the rear axle of the GPS? What's the GPS height? Where's the globe located on this particular machine? Just verify that those measurements are right. And once you have that done, I can click Done, and I have set up a tractor. So it's pretty simple stuff, especially when it comes to tractors. Now it becomes there's a few more details when we move into planters, when we move into sprayers and things like that, because then we're dealing with rate controllers, and we have to tell the system some of the different rate controllers that we have installed on our machines. So let me go ahead and I'm going to add a new piece of equipment. I'm going to add a planter. Air seeders are slightly different because they're going to have an air cart that's either, you can tell whether it's in the middle or in the back, but these wizards make it pretty easy to set this stuff up. So let me do a planter here, hit next, and say, okay, I'm running a John Deere planter. It's a 1770 NT. I find the model number here. It asks what my frame style is, and it gives you some pictures there to help you figure it out, if it's center trailing, dual, or single. I'll say this is a center trailing. It's going to ask me the number of rows I have on my planter, so I'll say this is a 24-row planter. My row spacing, I've got it set up for corn, and it's a 30-inch spacing. What's my hitch style? I'll say it's a 2-point pivot, and then I'll give it a name. This is my 1770 NT 24-row, or whatever I want to do to make sure I know what it is. Now, once I've set up the planter, there's a couple different numbers on here that are a little more detailed than what we saw on the tractor. So we can just work down our left-hand side of the page here, and so it's got some default, some information here based on what we already decided. The main thing here on the first planter setup page is, what is my planting display? What kind of monitor do I have in the cab that is reading the data coming off of this planter? And with this 1770 NT, I might have a Deere 2630 or 2600. Maybe I've got it being pulled by a Case tractor that has a Pro 700. Whatever the case is, we have a lot of compatibility to read those signals coming off the planter depending on what monitor you have in the cab. But for simplicity here, I'll say I've got a Deere 2630 as my planting display. Then it's going to ask, what's my planting controller? What is the rate controller on the planter? And I'm going to say I've got a John Deere SeedStar 2 rate controller. But find the appropriate controller so that we know how to read the information coming off that planter as you move through the field. Next, there's going to be a couple other measurements in here like we have with the tractor. So next, on the left-hand side of the screen, I'm going to click wheel distance, and it's going to ask me, what is my wheel distance? The distance from the pivot point to the lift wheels when the planter is lowered. So I'll put that number in. I'll define my number of trailing rows. I said I had a 24-row planter with a trailing row setup, so how many of those center rows are trailing rows? And I can change that as necessary. What's the seed exit distance to the trailing rows? And what's the seed exit distance to the standard rows? Then the last thing on the left-hand side is the application setup. If I am putting down liquid fertility or some sort of starter or something with the planter in addition to seed, what is the rate controller that is controlling that product? So if I've got starter going down with the planter, I can say, yeah, it's got a Green Star rate controller here, and how many sections do I have? It's either full planter width, if it's one section, or do I have right and left control of the starter as it's going down? So I can put in that first product that I control and what rate controller's on it. And if I have a second product that I'm putting down with the planter as well, I can choose the rate controller associated with that second product as well. So maybe I've got a planter with, I've got a rate controller on the seed, and then I've got 2 rate controllers for other products that go down with the planter. One of them is a Green Star, and one of them is a John Deere Rate Controller 2000. So just go through this process of all the little steps on the left-hand side, whether it's a planter or an air seeder or a sprayer or whatever it is, and it's pretty quick to set up this equipment. Tell us what rate controllers you're using, tell us the measurements of your equipment, and your equipment will then be ready to go. So I just hit done here, and I now have that 1770 NT 24-row planter set up. So pretty simple to get started, but definitely take the time to do this now while it's winter and there's snow on the ground, and don't wait until the day you're ready to get started planting. Take the time to build this equipment. Make sure you check the measurements, that the measurements are correct, and the distances from the GPS to the hitch, from the hitch to the seed exit, those kind of things. You have a pretty good idea of what those are. And they don't need to be accurate to the ½ inch. Just make sure they're in the ballpark within a couple inches so that we are, in fact, mapping data to the correct place in your field as you drive through the field doing your various activities. So I'm not going to say anything more about setting up equipment. Again, if anyone has any questions about doing that, please go ahead and type those in, and we'll get to them here by the end of the webinar today. But it should be pretty simple to build your equipment following the wizards that are in here. Okay, let's go, and I'm going to use the home button. There's a little house button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, and that will take me back to the home. And let's go over to the settings page now of FieldView, because there's a number of things to be aware of in settings that you can set up that will make life easier and make sure that the data you're collecting in the field is the way that you want it to be. So I'm going to click on settings, and we'll kind of go through a couple of these pages on the left-hand side. So the first one, under General, there's a couple of things to look at here. Number one, on the right-hand side of the page, there's an Edit Yield Units option. So some crops, if you're doing corn, if you're doing wheat, if you're doing sorghum, whatever it is that you're doing, how do you want those crops to report? And we have some defaults. Like if I go in here and I say, hey, I'm doing corn, by default it is bushels. But if you want to, you can change it to pounds or U.S. tons. So I know there's some of these crops that, depending on the way that you harvest it and the way that you record it, you may want bushels, pounds, or U.S. tons on whatever the crop is. This is your option to switch those from our defaults, and you can do that really on any crop type. So just something to be aware of that it's there. Another thing to be aware of here is, let's say you are, you're a fairly large operation and you've got, 3 or 4 planters in the combine, or 3 or 4 planters in the field, or 3 or 4 combines in the field at the same time. And the guys running them, the hired hands that are running those machines, you don't want them to accidentally mess up any of your data. There is a restricted mode here that you can turn on, and as you can see, restricted mode prevents users of this iPad from deleting fields, deleting equipment, deleting field pins and field regions, keeps them from making edits to equipment, hybrid seed treatments and applications, or entering yield adjustments. So if you're given putting this iPad in a piece of equipment where the operator is someone who isn't very well trained on the system and all they're going to do is collect data, but they shouldn't be editing anything, you can turn restricted mode on, and then you'll choose a password basically here, and then you have the power to unlock and lock that iPad from the restricted mode. So that's another feature that was added relatively recently to be aware of. Okay, let's move on down the list here, and let's go to data. So if I go to the data tab on the left-hand side of the page, this shows me all the data that I have on my iPad. I can see that I've got data from 2015, 16, 17, and 18. Now, all this data is stored locally, and you can also see a bar at the bottom of the page that shows how much available space I have on my iPad. And in my case, I have 82 gigs of free space on the iPad, so I'm clear to go planting and spraying and doing everything this season. I've got a lot of free space. But if that available space, if you come to this page and that available space is getting down to a gig or 2 gig, that's a pretty small amount of free space on your iPad, you're going to probably want to clean up some data off your iPad before you start planting this spring so you don't run out of space in the middle of planting. Because if you do run out of space in the middle of planting, your iPad will just shut down, and you will not be able to continue collecting data in FieldView Drive until you clear space. And obviously the last thing we want to do in the middle of planting is, oh, let's stop for a half an hour while we delete movies and pictures and stuff off this iPad so I can keep going. So I would recommend just make sure there are at least a couple of gigs free. You know, the more the better. And there's a few different ways you can do that. You can go in, obviously the things that take up the most space on your iPad are movies and pictures and video files. So find and delete those things that you don't need. Also here you can see that I have, 398 megabits of 2016 data on this iPad, and I've got 787 megabits of 2015 data on this iPad. That's all data that's stored locally that I can always bring back if I want to, and I can access it at any time in the Black app. So I could go in here and say, you know what, to clear up space, I'm going to get rid of this 2015 data. I've got this Green Valley file here. I don't need it, or if I do need it, I can bring it back, or I can look at it in the Black app. So I'm going to go ahead and, clear my 2015 data and hit clear. It'll delete it out of the system. It isn't lost. It's still stored in the cloud, and I can bring it back if I need to, but that helps free up a little bit of space here on the iPad if I want to get rid of some of those old years of data, at least from being stored locally here. Now, the other thing that I want to show you on data, some of you, if you're new to the system, you may not have any data in the system yet. But once you do collect data, there is some data sending functionality on this page just to be aware of that you may want to use as the season goes along. So if I, for example, go into here 2018 and some of the data that I have collected, I've got a couple of different options that are worth noting here. So one, I can send this 2018 data. So let's say that I was doing some custom planting for a guy, or some custom spraying or custom harvesting. I did some custom work for one of my neighbors, and he has a FieldView account. It could be a free FieldView account, the kind that anyone can access, where pretty much all he has is weather data and map visualization. It could be a paid account. It doesn't matter. If he has a FieldView account, I can send data files to him. So if I'm going to do some custom planting or some custom harvesting for a guy, and he has a FieldView account, as part of doing that work for him, it's a nice touch to be able to send him the map of what you did so that he's got that record of what was planted, on what date, what populations, all the details of the work that was done. So it's as simple as coming in here and saying, put in his email address, like who is the guy that I just did this for, and I pick an email address from my address book here, or type one in. And I say, you know what, this Archer field is the field that I did for him. And if I click that Archer, put a checkbox there, or check as many fields as are necessary, I can then hit the Send to Account button here, and it will send those files to his Climate FieldView data inbox. He can review them, import them, and have those maps available in his Climate account. The one you probably want to use here is Send to Account. Send to Account will put it directly into his FieldView account, or at least in the data inbox, so he can review and then bring it into his Climate account. If you choose Send Field Files, it's going to send DAT files via email. That they're basically the hard copies of the data files, but there's going to be additional steps to bring those into FieldView. If you hit Send Sharing Key, that's something different as well. That basically sends a sharing key that will allow him to have that data accessible in some other third-party software, SMS or SST or Mapshots or something like that. But the Send to Account is the one that will send it directly to his Climate FieldView account, so he can look at it in data inbox, approve it, and bring it in to see those maps. So something else that you might want to be able to do there. While I'm on this data page, the other thing I want to show you is the Add Activity function. So let's say that as the season goes along, you are mapping planting data, you're mapping your spray data, but you didn't map your tillage passes, or you didn't map one of your fertility passes, but you want to have a record of that in your Climate FieldView system. Well, there's this Add Activity button in the upper right-hand corner, and what it allows you to do is to create a flat rate map of really any pass in the Climate FieldView system for those passes that you didn't capture live in the field, or which you can't import via our data inbox tool. So let's say that I did fall tillage this past year. I did fall tillage, and I didn't have the whole climate system set up, so I didn't have Drive plugged in when I did it. I didn't capture that map live while I was going to the field. But I want to have that record of my fall tillage in the system so I can have the complete story of every pass that was completed relative to the 2019 crop year. So what I can do is I can go in here and say, I want to enter an activity. And I hit next, and I pick the field. I say, hey, this Archer farm, what did I do? Well, I need to pick a piece of equipment that could have done the activity. It doesn't need to be the actual piece of equipment that did the activity. It just needs to be a piece of equipment that could have done the activity. So if I'm doing if I'm making a corn planting map, I don't have to pick. I've got 3 different planters in here. I don't have to pick the actual planter that did it. I just have to pick any planter. Now in this case, I'm going to do a tillage, so I'm going to just pick my tillage bar. I think I have one set up in here. Here, there's a piece of tillage equipment, so I'm going to use that. And then it's going to say, what's the pass name? This is my my fall tillage. Is what I want to call this. And then I say, when did I do it? Well, I did it let's say I did it on November 15th of 2018 is when I did tillage. And then I simply click Add to create maps. And what it's going to do is it's going to take that field boundary for Archer, and it's going to fill it in with a tillage pass, say the whole field was tilled on November 15th, and now I've got that data in my record. So that's a nice tool to capture data that maybe you can't capture with Drive. And it could be a planting map. It could be a spray map. It could be even a harvest map. There's some additional details that go on there. But essentially, any pass that you didn't capture or you can't move in via data inbox, this is a way to create it in the system so you have complete records for all of your fields. So this might be something that you want to do here over the next few weeks or months here before we get started this spring. Capture your fall tillage data. Put those records in there so you know what you did. You do have to do it a field at a time. There's no bulk system in there yet that says, hey, apply this to all my fields. But you just pick what activity you did, what date you did it, hit build, and it will build that map. Okay, I'm going to skip the devices section here for a minute, so we're going to go over that once we start connecting. But the next one I want to look at is hybrids on the left-hand side of the page. So one of the big benefits of the Climate FieldView system is the ability to run yield analysis at the end of the year to help get insights into what is working and what's not on your farm. And one of the things that almost every farmer I work with that wants to know is which hybrids were my best performers, which hybrids were my worst performers, and what do I want to use going into next year? When those early seed purchase deadlines come along, let's look at my data to figure out what worked and what didn't from a hybrid and variety perspective. So in order for that to work, we have to have consistent hybrid names across our operation. And if we're trying to type hybrid names in as we are in the field, in the planter, it's easy to fat finger something, or, you know, one guy names it DKC 5356, the other guy names it DKC 53-56. What we want to do is we want to build our virtual seed shed here, where we've got a preloaded list of every hybrid and variety that we have on farm, so that when we are in the field telling our system what hybrid or variety is in the planter right now, we don't have to type it in. We can just pick from a pre-populated short list. And that's what this hybrid section is about. It's about building that virtual seed shed of what hybrids and varieties you have purchased and you have on farm this year. And it's really simple to do. So all we do here is, and your list may be blank here if you've already done, if this is your first time in the FieldView system, or you may have hybrids and varieties on here from past years that you no longer are going to have on farm this year. So if I'm looking at this and I have hybrids that I'm not going to have on farm this year, like let's say I have DeKalb 5345, I didn't purchase any of that this year, I can just hit the remove button here and it will clean up my pre-populated list. So remove the old ones that you have in there that you're not going to have on farm this year. And now let's go ahead and put in the new ones that we are going to have on farm. So maybe I purchased a new variety this year. And so I hit add new hybrid. And I start typing. And I go, you know, let's see if I can find a variety. I'm not a seed guy, so I don't do this as well as some of you probably do. But let's see if I can find a DeKalb number, I bet. So I start typing in DKC, and it's going to start coming up with all the different DeKalb numbers, and I give it a number, and I say, yeah, 5808, that's the one I have on farm. I tap it, and you will see that DKC 5808 got added to my seed list here of the seeds that I have on farm. So just take the time here, again, while it's winter, to put in all the hybrids and varieties that you are going to have on farm this year, and it will make planting go that much smoother because you will have consistent hybrid names as you plant each field rather than potentially having duplicates or things that are not quite the right. The other part of hybrids here, there's a seed treatment section. If I click seed treatments on the top of the page, and if I'm going to be having different seed treatments on farm this year, just like I built my hybrid and variety list, I can build my seed treatment list and say, you know what seed treatment do I have on farm this year? I've got, I'm going to be using some quick roots. It should pull up here, some quick roots corn. And I tap on it. Now it is in my list of available seed treatments. And as I get in the planter, I won't have to type these things out. I just pick it from the short list and go, and life becomes a lot easier. Okay, moving on down the list, next is applications. So on the left-hand side of the page, just like we built our virtual seed shed and we built our virtual seed treatments, things we have on farm, we want to build our tank mixes. What are the various tank mixes that we'll be crossing the field with this year? And it's very similar to the hybrids list. You just click that I want to build a new tank mix. And you call this your, this is my corn mix. And when I build it, it says, is it a granular or is it a liquid? I'm going to say it's a liquid application. And then, what's my base rate? When I put this down, I put it down at, let's say, 10 gallons an acre. And what products are in the tank? Well, let's say I've got AMS in there. And how many of the 10 gallons, how much of it is AMS? I say that's, and I'm not a chemical guy, so I may be making a lot of mistakes here, but I've got 8 gallons of AMS. And then it also includes Roundup, and I picked the right version of Roundup that I'm running. It's Roundup Pro Max, and there's however many ounces of that, 12 ounces, not gallons. I can change my gallons here to ounces, and I put in all the products that I'm going to have in this tank mix. Basically, build my tank mixes pre-season, and once I've done this, then my operators of the sprayers or the planters as they're in the field, again, they don't have to do any typing when they're in the field. They just go to the pre-populated list of options, pick the one that they have in the tank, and go. And it's much easier. You get much cleaner data collected, and life will just, all your reporting, all the functionality at the end of the season that you want to use will work out a whole lot better. So take the time to build your tank mixes here, and it will allow you to get all that done. Last couple of things here. I'm going to skip the prescriptions page for a minute and the imported shape files, and let's go down to notifications on the lower left-hand side of the page. So a couple different notifications that are available to help make your life easier. The first one is email reports. So if you put in an email address at the top of the page there, you can check the box for field change or daily. And essentially what this does is it sends you an email every time that something happens in the field. So if you've got 3 planters running and a couple sprayers and a couple different pieces of equipment out there, if you put it on field change, you're going to get an email every time any one of those planters or sprayers that is connected to Drive and has a signal, has a cell signal in the field. You're going to get an email every time one of those planters or sprayers changes fields. So it'll kind of keep you on track of, hey, planter 1 moved from the west field to the home field, and planter 2 moved from dad's farm or dad's field to the Hoboken field, or whatever the actions are that are happening. Now, if you have a lot of planters and sprayers, that might get pretty annoying to get those constant pings through the day, or it might actually be really helpful in keeping track of where all that equipment is and how progress is going. So your option to either choose field change, or you can check the box on daily, and you'll just get one report at the end of the day that says planter 1 went into these 6 fields, planter 2 went into these 5 fields, planter 3 went into these 7 fields, and you'll get that daily summary of all the activity. So feel free to set that up as you see fit. Now the other one is the text alerts. So you can put in a phone number here, and you can get alerts on various metrics coming off of the planters this spring. So one common one is I might go in here and say I want to add a new alert setting and I want to set a planting alert. And on which planter? Well, I've got two different planters in my operation, so let's start with the 1770 NT 24 row. And my alert is going to be, and some of these alerts are only good with if you have a 2020 that is measuring some of these things like excess downforce or good spacing, but all planters measure speed. So I can say, send me an alert if the speed on this planter goes greater than 6 miles an hour, because I have told my planter operators do not drive faster than 6 miles an hour, and I want to know. This is kind of a little bit big brothery, but let's make sure that the seed gets in at the way that we want it to, and the operators are doing what we tell them to. So I hit done here, and now I'm going to get a text message anytime that 1770 NT 24 row planter goes faster than 6 miles an hour. Now I'm not going to get those texts basically every single time it goes faster than 6 miles an hour. I think the setting is that he has to do it for more than 5 acres. If he does it for more than 5 total acres, then I am going to get the text. So it's a way to kind of keep track of what's going on in the field and make sure that things are happening the way that you want them to. So that's about it. I think I'm going to stop on the settings page there. We're going to get back to this page when we connect our drive and show you what this really looks like in the field. But let's move on to the fields page. And so I'm going to use the house button in the upper right-hand corner to go back to our home screen. And now I'm going to go to the fields page. So if I click on the fields page, what you'll see is that I've got a bunch of fields that I've got these field boundaries in the system. They're all down, up and down the left-hand side of the page. And then I've got some options on the right-hand side of the page where I can preset some things. If I know what hybrids can be planted in a field, or I know what seed treatment's going to go on the seed in a field, or I know what spray passes are going to happen in a field, I can preset some of these to make life easier for my operators. Now, sometimes it's hard to preset some of these things, like from a planting perspective. You know, we don't want to set it too far ahead of time because it very well might change based on weather conditions. But let's say it's the morning of and the planter is loaded and I know where this planter is going. If I want to make life easier on my planter operator, I can preload what is going to be planted to some of those fields this day. So I can say, for example, you know, the Abilene field, I click Add Hybrid, and it's going to pull up my short list of all the different hybrids that I told the system I have on farm, and I can say 5356 is getting planted in that field. And now when the planter pulls into the field, the operator is not going to have to tell our system what he's planting. It's going to already know that it's 5356 because I've pre-populated that. Same thing with seed treatment. I can say, and it's got Quick Roots corn treatment on it. Or if it's a sprayer going to the field, I can say, hey, he's going with this corn pre-mix. I'm going to put that in there, and then he won't have to make the choice when he gets to the field. So there's some options there to preload things, you know, especially maybe day of when there's no more volatility or variability in what we might do. We know what's going out to the field, preset it, and it'll make life a little bit easier on the operator if you've got an operator who isn't very familiar with the system or how to make these kind of selections. The other thing on this fields page to be aware of is if you've got a field that is in your system and you've preloaded a field boundary, you can see all those down the left-hand side. Anytime I pull into one of those fields, we know where the field boundary is. Our GPS will pick it up, and as we pull into the field, it's going to say, hey, it looks like you've entered the Arlington East field. Is this the field you want to make active? And you hit yes. But what if you're doing custom work for someone so you don't have a field boundary in the system? Well, there's an Add New Field functionality at the bottom of the page. And if I click Add New Field, I can go in and give my client farm field information. I can say this is, you know, Bob's West Field, if I spell right, West Field, and I pick a client. It's a default client. I don't really care what these things are, default farm, and I hit Add. Now I've got this Bob's West field in here that's got a question mark by it that says, I don't know what the shape of this field and I don't know where in the world it is. But by creating this field name, if I'm doing custom planting work for this guy and I'm going to custom plant this field, I can now select this field when I get to the field because the GPS won't automatically prompt me. I can make it the active field, and as I plant, our system will draw a boundary around the area that you planted. So if you are doing custom planting, custom spraying, custom harvesting, this add new field functionality is what you'd want to do before you entered the field so that it's got a name, make it the active field, and then get started, and we'll create a boundary around it, and then you can send that data on to the person who you created the data for. Okay, so that said, let's go ahead and click the house in the upper right-hand corner to get back to our main screen. And I know I'm going through a lot here, and for those of you who are new, it's a lot of information. I am going to send a recording of this out to everyone when I'm done, so if you want to review it again or look at any of this in more detail, you'll have that resource available to you to refresh on how to do some of these things. But let's go ahead and let's go to the help button there. And if we go to help, there's a couple things that are worth noting here. First, there's this contact support section. If you are ever in the field and you're having a problem, you can't get the system to recognize your planter, or you're seeing skips in your maps, or something doesn't look right. The best way to get in contact with our support team is to fill out this form on this page. Put in your contact phone number, choose which product it is that you require support on, that, hey, I'm running either FieldView Drive or a Precision Planting 2020. So I put in my phone number, I put in my thing, and just put a brief description. Can't get my planter to connect, or whatever the thing is, and hit submit ticket. It will send a ticket to our support team, and our support team treats these with the highest priority. I mean, if you call in, you're going to get pretty quick service. You know, someone's going to answer your call. But these tickets that are submitted from the field, we assume that you are currently in the field, you are having a problem that is stopping you from collecting data, and we are going to get back to you very quickly. And in addition, we'll have access to the data that was being generated in your iPad to help us troubleshoot the problem. So if you have a problem while you're in the field, this is a great way to submit a ticket. You can get back to what you're doing, and someone will call you. Other things on this page, this help articles section is actually really helpful. We've built a pretty robust help system, and whatever it is you're having a question about. Let's say you have a question about how to connect an Ag Leader Integra monitor. If I just start typing in Integra, it's probably, I hope, going to come up with, so I've got a result here. Here's an Ag Leader Integra adapter kit. Here's how to connect an Integra to a Claas harvester. Here's how to export data from an Ag Leader Integra into FieldView. There's a lot of different keywords that you can type in here, and you'll probably come up with an article or a video that will show you how to do what you're looking to do. So feel free to self-service here as well with the help articles if you don't want to call support or submit a ticket. Also here on this help page is the ability to look at your cloud sync status. So as you're out in the field and you're collecting data, if you have a cell signal in the field, that data will be pushed to the cloud and saved, so that in case you run over your iPad or your iPad gets stolen, you don't lose your farm data. It gets saved to the cloud, so you can always bring it back whenever you need it. If you ever have any questions about has your data been offloaded, you can look at it here. Your cloud sync status is you can look through all your fields and say, are they all at 100%, or at some of these have they not yet synced yet, and there's data that needs to be sent. So if you've ever had any questions, that's just some place you can see that. Okay. The last thing I want to touch on here in the tools on the FieldView system before I go into showing you what it really looks like when you're live in the field collecting data, let's look at analysis. And when I look at analysis here, I just want to caveat this with, I am on Cab App 8.0, and 8.0 is not publicly available yet. It's going to be available here in the next, probably in the next week or so. We've submitted it to the Apple Store, and so it should be coming out soon. But I want to show you some cool tools that are going to be available to you in the Cab app starting very soon. And so if I click on analysis, again, this is something you don't have access to yet. I'm on an internal beta version of the pre-release of 8.0. There are some really cool tools that are going to be available this next year that allow you to get reports on almost anything you can imagine. And this is the first version of this. We're going to make this cleaner and better going forward, but this is the first time we're putting these tools in the Cab app. And let me just show you some of the things that you can do. So first thing is, in the upper left-hand corner, I choose what I want to analyze: planting data, application data, yield data, or weather data. So if I choose planting data and I choose 2018 corn, I can choose any year and crop type. But let's say I'm looking at my 2018 corn. This report here, report of planting by field, just shows me all my fields that have been planted and how many acres of each have been planted. So this will be a nice report to at any point in the middle of planting season. If you want to kind of get a feel for, hey, what's been planted and what hasn't been planted yet, this will show you all the fields that have been planted so far, and hopefully you can figure out which ones haven't been planted and get that kind of quick understanding of, hey, what's gone in the ground, what do we have yet to do. Another report that can be available is by hybrid. You can say, okay, you know, how many acres of each different hybrid have we planted this season, and where did they get planted? So I can look at this and say, hey, you know, we've planted 245 acres of, and I can sort it by clicking on the headers at the top to say the most that we've planted was DeKalb 3007. It was planted to 245 acres. What fields did it go in? If I tap on that one, it's going to say, okay, it went in Brandenburg North. Or if I had planted that hybrid in 5 different fields, it would give me a list of all the different fields where that hybrid had been planted to at least 1 acre. So it'll be some nice, easy reporting of as the planting season goes along, what did we put where, because, you know, things change in the heat of battle, and did we actually, you know, where do we put these things? Should be nice to keep track of some of that information. Additionally, if I switch over here to applications, I can start looking at things like, hey, how many acres have been sprayed on each of my different fields? And, you know, let's look at applications. What products were sprayed and where were they sprayed? If I've got a particular product, you know, how many fields have gotten the Bean Bioforge spray, or how many fields have gotten the burn down tank mix? Additionally, we get into things like product, where we're going to be able to get reports that tell us the total number of gallons of every product that was sprayed on our farm. Like if I look at my 28% here. If I click on that, it's going to say we have sprayed a total of 3,876 gallons of 28, and these are the 5 different farms that it went on this year and the total number of acres that have been sprayed. So you're going to have some cool access to reporting of products, applications, all kinds of things to keep track of full farm, enterprise-wide, total number of gallons, total number of seeds, all the different things that we've taken a look at here. And this is new in 8.0. It should come out here in the next in the next 7 to 10 days is my guess. Okay, I'm going to leave that one and go back to the house to get back to the main screen. And now what I want to do is I want to actually show you what it looks like to plant, spray, you know, do things with the FieldView system. And to do that, what you're going to basically do is you're going to take the iPad, bring it to the cab with you, and let's say that we're planting. We're going to take it in the cab of the planter, and we're going to have to plug in the FieldView drive into the CAN port or the adapter cable that we have in the cab of our tractor. Now, a couple things before we get to that point. Let me go back out on my iPad and let's go over to settings. So if you're in your iPad, there's a couple things you want to check on settings. Settings is this gear button that's kind of in the lower left-hand side of my screen. And when I go to settings, there's a couple things you'll want to check on your iPad to make sure that you are ready to collect data. Number one is you want to make sure that Bluetooth is on. So there's a Bluetooth section on the left-hand side of the page, and if I click it, you can see that my Bluetooth is on. So that's step one, because the way that as our drive collects data from the tractor, it's going to send it to the iPad via Bluetooth. And if Bluetooth isn't on, it can't communicate, and you will not get any data flowing through to the iPad. So make sure Bluetooth is on. The second thing we want to check is in General. So if you go down to General on the left-hand side of the page, I'm going to click on General here. What you want to check is click the About button on your iPad. And when you go to About, or actually better than About, let's go to the Software Update. That's a little easier to see it. It's going to tell you what software version of the iOS and what version of software you are running on your iPad. And you can see that I'm running 12.1.1 and my software is up to date. With our release of Cab App 8.0, we are going to require that you are on at least 12.1. So if you're seeing something that says, you know, your software is not up to date and you're on iOS 11 point something, or you're 12.0, or you're 10 point something, or God forbid you're 9 point something, you need to update your iOS. Take the time to do this here. while it, before we get into the heat of battle, get to at least 12.1, and then you're going to be fine to run our software here this year. And sometimes these iOS updates take a while. They take, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour plus, especially if you're very out of date. So take the time to download the updates that are available to you on your iPad there. And if your iPad will not update to 12.1, if it says, hey, you are up to date and you're showing like 11 point something, then that means your iPad is too old to run our software. And really, I think it's only the iPads with the big fat plugs that are going to be too old, or some of the very earliest iPad Air 2s. Apple has stopped supporting them and doesn't allow them to upgrade to iOS 12.1. So if you're seeing that you are up to date and you're something short of 12.1, that is a sign that you need to go buy a new iPad before this planting season starts to run from. So just something to be aware of there. So now that I've checked my Bluetooth and I've checked my iOS that I'm up to date in where I need to be. The next thing is to plug in Drive and connect it via Bluetooth. And I've got a power source here that I can plug my Drive into. I'm not sitting at a tractor, but I'm going to go ahead and plug my Drive in. Actually, let me go back over to the Bluetooth screen first so you can see how this works. But I'm going to plug my Drive in. And when I do, it's going to flash some lights at me, a blue light and a green light. And you're going to see in a second here, I hope if this all connects correctly here, it just showed up as an other device. And it gave me a Bluetooth pairing request. Hamlin would like to pair with your iPad. This is just like if you get a new phone and you want to pair it to the Bluetooth in your truck. The first time that you get into the truck with that phone, you have to make a Bluetooth pairing. But every time after that, all you do is get in the truck and the two devices know each other and they start talking automatically. This is the same thing with Drive. The first time you plug it in and bring it in range of your iPad, they need to be paired. But once they've been paired, they're going to know each other forever going forward, and you'll be able to do that. I waited too long to pair that, so I'm going to hit OK, and let's see if it'll restart here. I was talking a little bit too long, and it decided that we weren't going to really pair that. So let me see if I can tap on this and make it happen. Give me just a minute here. I'll replug it in. Hopefully get it to resend its signal. It should pop up here in a minute, I hope, so I can actually pair this Drive. There we go. So I tapped on it. Hamlin is now connected. You can see it in my Bluetooth list there. So now that I've got this this Drive paired, I can then go back out of the settings section, go back into the Cab app, and when I go over to settings and devices, the little one on the left-hand side that looks like an iPad with a Drive, you can see that Hamlin is in there. All the other ones are out of range, but I've got this one that says tap to connect. So I just tap on it here. I'll get a little green checkbox, says Drive is connected, and now I've got to pick which piece of equipment I'm in. So I'm going to go back to the home screen, go to my equipment, and by default it's selected that I'm in the 1770 NT planter with the 8360R tractor. If that's what I'm really in right now, then I'm good. But if I want to change, I say actually this 1770 NT 24-row planter, that's the one that I'm in. I can set that one as active. It'll say, do you want to change it? I say yes. And it will switch out the piece of equipment to match the one that I tell it that I'm in. So you just have to select the piece of equipment that you're in, and you should be in good shape there. Now, what's going to happen here is I'm going to go back to the home screen, and when I'm collecting data, where I want to be is on the map screen. So once I confirm that I've got that green checkbox, so again, I go to settings, I go to devices, I've got a green checkbox, I go to equipment, I can see that the pieces of equipment that are connected are the ones that I'm actually in right now. I've got the right selections there. I can then go to map. And when I go to map, it's going to show me, okay, now you're ready to collect data. There's a bunch of green boxes on the left-hand side that are ready to start populating as soon as I start planting, but there's a bunch of yellow boxes on the left-hand side that need my attention. That's why they're yellow. So anytime you see a yellow box on the left-hand side of the screen when you go to the map page, it means you've got to make some selections there before you can start. So the other thing you'll want to do is select which field you're in. So I'm going to start by picking a field. Say, okay, I'm getting ready to start, and you can see that Bob's West field there. So if I was doing custom work, I could say that I'm in Bob's West field. Because I'm not really in a field right now, it's not auto-selecting my field, but normally when I pulled into the field, it would know where I was and it would auto-select. In this case, I'm going to have to force it because I'm doing this from my desk and I'm not really in the field. So I'm going to say, hey, I am getting ready to plant, and I am planting, I'm planting this Corcoran field. So I pick the field that I want to make active. It says, do you want to make this the active field? And actually, I'm going to say yes. And then it's going to ask me, well, what do you have in the planter? Okay, well, I'm going to say that I have corn, and I can choose my crop here. What hybrid? This is that short pick list that I said we created earlier. So I can pick one that I've set up earlier and say, hey, what I have in the field right, or in the planter right now is 6307. If I had something in the planter that I didn't have, for some reason I hadn't set up my virtual seed shed ahead of time, and it wasn't something that I had in my short pick list, I can instead say add new hybrid and just start typing in a number here. And I go, 208-23 stacks ribs, channel variety. That's what I actually have in the planter. Now, what if I've got a split planter? Well, I can select an additional hybrid and say I've also got 5356, and it's going to ask me which rows 5356 is in. I'm going to say it's in either I can do a row by row selection, or I can say one of them's in the left half and the other one is in the right half, and it will assign the rows appropriately. In addition to picking the hybrid, I can also tell it what seed treatment I have. I can say, yeah, I've got quick roots, and is it on all rows or is it only on half the planter? Whatever the case might be, I can set that up. I can say it's only on the left half of the planter. And now I hit confirm, and I've got my planter set up, at least in terms of and in the upper left-hand corner, that box turned green. And now it says I have two hybrids, and I've got quick roots corn seed treatment on one of them. The next thing it's going to say is, hey, you said that this planter had two applications or two rate controllers that could control applications as you're planting. So do you have anything in the planter that you're putting down with the planter? And I come in here and say, you know what? Yeah, I've got my corn free in here. I've got 28%. I've got starter in here. It would make maybe a little more sense. But pick the application that you've got in there that is being controlled by rate controller 1. And you hit confirm, and it will start mapping that. And do I have anything in B? No, I've got nothing in B, so I'm not going to put anything in there. And then the planter will, you'll start driving in the field, and we'll start mapping data. Now, as we're going, one of the things that we can also do is we can control, and this is a demo here, so I'm not sure there's really any data that's going to populate to the screen, but it's a demonstration of what it would look like when you are in the cab when you're planting. Now, you have a couple of options as well as what goes in those boxes on the left-hand side of the screen. And you can get to those using the Edit button at the bottom of the page. So if I click Edit, I can come in here and say, you know what, I don't really want an Application B box because I don't have an Application B. But what is helpful is I'd like to be able to drop a pin by just clicking on a button. Because as I'm going through the field, I want to mark the rocks in the field. And so I'm going to move that drop pin button over there, and it's going to make it a lot easier for me to drop pins as I go. Or maybe I know how big this field is, and I want a countdown to when I'm done. So I'm going to pull this field acres remaining over here and put it here, and this will count down the number of acres I have to go before I finish this field. So there's a number of different options that you can choose to put in here on the left-hand side as depending on what metrics you want to see while you are planting. Okay, so that is that, and you can see the planter moving through the field. It's not generating any data, but this is, again, just a kind of a fake demo. One other thing that I want to show you that's really, I think, quite helpful is the ability to remote view. So while I am in the planter here planting, maybe my agronomist wants to check in with me, or maybe Dad wants to check in and see where I am and how much progress I've made in the field. Or there's a variety of reasons why other people might want to look at your, how things are going in the planter. Or maybe I want to look in because I've got a hired hand running the planter, but I want to see how it's going and what he's doing out there. The remote view functionality is in the equipment page. So if you go over, if anyone there has their iPad with them, you can click on equipment, and there's a little farmer with a magnifying glass in the upper right-hand side of the page. And in order to remote view, if it's your operation, if the guy in the planter is part of your operation and you are on an iPad logged into the same account, this remote view button on the equipment page will just be lit up if that piece of equipment is in the field, it's running, and it has a cell signal, and you can just tap to remote view automatically on any piece of equipment that's in your operation. But what if you are, you're the dealer, or you're the agronomist, or you're a third party, and you want to look in on someone else's operation? Well, then they have to give you permission to look in. You can't just look in because you want to, but you can request permission, and I'll show you how this works. So here, when you click that little farmer in the upper right-hand corner, and you can type in a FieldView username, go ahead and do that if anyone wants to try this out and see how it works. And what I want you to search for is, this is my username on the lower center of the page. It's Jeff, the +, red nucleus @climate.com. I know it's a little bit long and unwieldy. It's an account I created a while ago. But if anyone wants to test remote view, go ahead and try and remote view to me using that farmer with the magnifying glass in the upper right-hand corner. Type in Jeff + red nucleus @climate.com in that blank right there. Hit search, and it's going to show you that I have a planter, an 8360R tractor with a 1770 NT 24-row planter that is active, and it will send me a request that says, hey, Bob wants to look at or wants to remote view your planting activity. I will get the choice to choose if I'm going to let him do that. So if anyone online or on the call here today wants to try remote view, feel free to go ahead and do that, and I'll approve it. And if no one wants to try it, well, then we won't take a look at how that works. That's fine as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is there is, though for those of you who've used the system before or those of you who haven't, remote view must be done from the cab app. So basically you say, I want a remote view, so I need to log into the cab app on my iPad, and then I will remote view to the iPad in the cab that is running the planter, sprayer, combine, whatever the case might be. We have a beta version that allows you to install cab app on an iPhone, so you don't need to have an iPad to do remote view. And this is, I think, a really cool new feature because we don't always have our iPads with us, but a lot of us have our iPhones with us. And if we want to check in and see where Dad is, or see where, how planting is going in a particular field, or see where those sprayers are, if we got our phone with us, instead, we don't have to call them and ask them where they are. You can just remote view in, take a look, see where they are, and go on about your day. One note on remote view: I wouldn't recommend running remote view just endlessly. It does use a lot of data because it's essentially like streaming a movie from one iPad to the other, one iPad to another iPhone. So it is a bit of a data hog. So don't use it just all day long. Use it to check in and see how things are going, and then disconnect. But if you have an iPhone and you want to be able to run remote view from your iPhone, send me a note. My email, my main email is jeff@climate.com. It's super simple. I was one of the first 5 people at the company when we started it 12 years ago. And when we started it, we said, we don't need last names. There's only one Jeff, so you get to be jeff@climate.com. Now, of course, we're quite a bit larger, and so email addresses have gotten more complicated, but I have the very simple jeff@climate.com. Send me an email if you would like access to cab app on iPhone, and I can get you access to that so you can use it for remote view and more this year. I mean, you can't use it to collect data in the cab. It can't be a replacement for the iPad in the cab, but it allows you to do a lot of the other things, whether it's reporting or whether it's looking at maps or whether it's remote view. It allows you to do it from an iPhone, so you don't need an iPad for those situations where you are not in the cab. Just send me an email to jeff@climate.com with your username, your climate username, what you log into FieldView with, and I will be able to get you access to that program. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing now. I think that's most of what I wanted to cover in getting ready for planting this year. So I hope that was helpful. I'm going to go and see if any questions have been submitted over the course of the presentation today. And of course, if anyone has other questions, please do submit those. I'm going to forward also through all these slides. I think I've got a little help screen at the end in terms of what's next. And has the support number and my email address on it. But let me take a look at what questions have been submitted, because I know we're up on about an hour here. Okay, A question here from Rick. I have no hybrids in my list of choices, nor any seed treatments. How do I add the first hybrid? Rick, I hope I answered that question, but when you go to that hybrid list, there's just an add a new hybrid button that you'll press. It will bring you to that global list of seed catalog, and you can add anything. I mean, pretty much we have every seed variety that exists in North America here. And it's not just corn and soybeans, and it's certainly not just Monsanto varieties. You can get a Pioneer variety in there. You can get a Bex variety in there. You can get potatoes. You can get carrots. You can get, almost every commercial seed product that exists in the world today, or at least in North America, is in that list, so you can pre-populate with the official seed characteristics. We are seed agnostic here. We allow you to keep track of absolutely everything that you do on farm, and so hopefully you found that list in the course as I answered some more questions there, Rick. A question here from Mike about, can we upload applications from My John Deere 2018 now? I didn't get into Data Inbox here today. I have other webinars on Data Inbox, but your question, Mike, is correct that we still, when you're taking data that's already been, things that have already been done, and you're trying to import them via Data Inbox, today we can import field boundaries, planting files, and harvest files. We still can't quite import as-applied files or fertility files. I've been told March at the latest we'll be able to do that. It should hopefully be in February sometime. And if you're really interested in doing it now, Mike, if you do, I think there's actually a beta available that some guys are doing it and doing some testing. But if you can wait until February or March at the latest, we'll have that access so you can upload all the as-applied and fertility files. A question here from Tracy. When you're in the cab, can the iPad that you're collecting data with be Wi-Fi only? Yes, it can. So if your iPad is Wi-Fi only, it will still collect data in the field because the way that we collect data from the FieldView drive is via Bluetooth. So the drive plugs into the machine, it listens to all that machine data, and it passes it to the iPad via Bluetooth. So a cell signal or a cell-enabled iPad is not required. Now, what do you lose by not having a cell-enabled iPad? Well, you're going to lose remote view, because when you're in the field planting, there's no way for someone to essentially dial into your iPad because your iPad doesn't have that kind of transmission signal. So you will not be able to remote view to that iPad. The other thing you would lose is if you had multiple combines or multiple planters in the same field, you're going to lose the ability to do swath control, because those two machines won't be able to communicate with each other about where they've been. The only thing your iPad will know is where it's been, but it won't be able to talk to the other because it doesn't have a cell signal. So you would lose swath control and the ability to build maps in real time for multiple planters or multiple combines in the same field. What else? It looks like that is it in terms of questions that have come in. The last thing I would just say is there are a number of different adapter kits that are required to collect data from different machines, especially when you're mixing red and green planters or red tractors and green planters or blue tractors and red planters and things like that. Before you get started this season, I think it's worth a call to support. If you've never used our system before for planting or spraying or whatever, just to check in with your equipment and make sure you've got everything you need to make it work. If someone set you up and you're pretty good, then you should be in good shape. But if you have a question that says, hey, is this going to work? Am I going to be able to plug drive in because I've got a New Holland tractor with a case sprayer or whatever the case might be? They can look it up for you or show you how to look it up yourself to make sure that you have, because some of these things need these adapter cables that's going to help translate some of the data as it passes through the drive. And the last thing you want to do is get into the field and all of a sudden find out you need to order an adapter cable that's going to take 3 or 4 days to show up. So if you have any questions about compatibility and whether or not your system's going to work, call support. They'll let you know if you need any adapter cables based on your configuration, and you can just make doubly sure that you're going to be ready to go this spring, and all you have to do is get in the piece of equipment and start going. It looks like one more question did come in. Can you do swath control across 2 accounts? So we're using 2 combines, and each combine operator has a different climate account. Can they still sync up? Let me think through that. No, I'm pretty sure the answer to that is going to be no. They would need to be logged into the same climate account to have swath control. We don't share data across climate accounts. We assume that each climate account is an individual farmer's account, and he wouldn't, there's no ability to share your data in the CAB app. So I think in that case, Bill or Blake, they would have to be logged into exactly the same account to have swath control work. Okay, I know I'm up on time. I hope that was helpful, folks. I know it's a lot of stuff in a short time period. I will get this recording, though, processed and sent out to everyone so you can watch it again at your leisure. And if you have other I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of webinars between now and April of this year on a variety of topics. You can always go to climate.com/webinars to see the latest. My January schedule is published. I'll be publishing a February schedule here as I learn my travel schedule and can pick the dates that work for me. Sign up for the things that are interesting, and even if you can't attend, I'll end up sending out the recording of those webinars when I do it. So even if you can't attend live, at least if you sign up, you will get access to the recording, and I hope that helps as well. We certainly look forward to working with everyone here in the 2019 season. A lot of really exciting new functionality and cool things that we can do with the system, and we can't wait to hear how it's working for you. So thanks, everyone, for joining. I hope winter goes quickly, and look forward to Plant 19. Talk to you all soon.